next Monday at 9 p.m., make sure you're near a television to watch the movie The House I Lived In. It is the grand prize winner for the documentary category in Sundance, the film festival for 2012. The director of the movie The House I Live In, Eugene Jarecki. Eugene, welcome to Big 550 KTRS.
Thank you very much for having me. By the way, it's at 10 p.m. on Monday, not 9 p.m. 10 p.m. on PBS around the country.
Okay, good. But Central Time, it will be 9 p.m.?
No, I think it's 10 p.m. in all markets around the country.
Okay, good. All right, 10 p.m. All right, good. The movie's called The House I Live In. Eugene, you said you wanted to make this movie for the last 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, the movie's been inside me kind of developing itself as filmmakers have subjects that preoccupy them, but you're not really ready to make the film because you don't know enough. I've been learning a lot about this for 20 years now in fits and starts, and it took me into sort of great earnest in the past 6 or 7 years where I started really making the film. And it's a movie, though, the themes of it and what it concerns in terms of the war on drugs and its impact on poor communities across this country, that's been with me for a very long time.
Tell us what you did. You looked at 20 different states in this movie.
Even more. I think we were in about 25 states filming the movie.
And what do we find out? What did you learn?
Well, the stories are so much the same across this country. I mean, I think people, maybe some people have seen The Wire, which is David Simon's HBO show that features what goes on in the drug war in Baltimore. And in many ways, David Simon is in my film. And in many ways, my film, I think, captures sort of a national portrait of the same phenomena that you see at work in The Wire, the same kind of wrongheadedness, the same kind of dysfunction and injustice and corruption. All across the American spectrum, I talk to drug dealers, to users, family members, cops, judges, jailers, wardens, tried to get a portrait of the country trapped inside this broken system and see the struggles that people have and the sort of small triumphs they try to pursue and all of that. It's highly dramatic, but it all underscores a system completely out of control.
Yeah, the war on drugs, we all agree, is a complete failure. Of all the stats you have here, marijuana arrests make up more than half of all the drug arrests in the U.S., and 90% of those are for possession only.
Yes, and you take a city like New York City, we have 700,000 stops on the street every year in New York City. That's one person being stopped every 45 seconds. Of those, 90%, 87% are young blacks and Latinos. Now, black people use drugs the same as white people in this country. 14% of the country is black, and 14% of America's drug users are black. So how is it that over and over in cities across this country, you see situations where you're 8 or 9 times as likely to be stopped if you're black as if you're white? And as a black person, how could you look at that in any way other than as profiling and injustice? And the reality is the system has evolved that way for a lot of reasons. And part of the problem of the drug war is racism, but it goes much farther than that.
The movie is called The House I Live In. It won the Grand Jury Prize for a documentary in the 2012 Sundance. It's going to air Monday, 10 p.m. on PBS here in St. Louis. Eugene, did you find anybody who actually defended the war on drugs?
It's becoming harder and harder to find such people. I mean, once upon a time, politicians loved to talk tough on crime and tough on drugs. It got them elected and got them to stay in office. The problem is that the drug war is such a complete failure at this point that who wants to be associated with it? We've been at it for 40 years. We've spent $1 trillion. We've had 45 million drug arrests, and we have nothing to show for it. Who wants to stake their reputation on an escapade of that insanity? And so you find that there's not a lot of strong advocacy for continued intensity in the drug laws. There's more sort of quiet acquiescence, a sort of a quiet reality that politicians hope no one will notice the kind of destruction and havoc this is wreaking on American communities.
There are some politicians who are actually calling for a total change on the war on drugs.
Yes, and you see that from the right side of the spectrum all the way to the left. You have Ron Paul and Grover Norquist and George Shultz, Chris Christie, Pat Robertson. These are all people against the war on drugs from the right because they see its failure and they see the huge waste of money it represents, $50 billion a year. But then you have voices from the left who say, well, this is also a human rights problem. This is a completely unjust, highly racist, highly classist, destructive force that basically has one section of the population profiting on the incarceration of other fellow human beings. And so those voices from the right and the left are coming together to represent, I think, an unprecedented chorus against the continuation of the drug war.
Is the opposite of the drug war legalizing these drugs?
I don't believe so. I think what you want is a system where the government has a continuing role, but an intelligent one, like we saw the government fashion with alcohol. We didn't just legalize alcohol. What the government did was maintain a controlled substance position with alcohol. Alcohol cannot be sold to children. It's a crime. Children cannot use it. Grown-ups can use it responsibly, but if you use it irresponsibly, it's going to become an aggravating factor in any crime you may commit. And so you cause a public disturbance or you act in a way with alcohol that's out of control, you're going to be considered, driving while drunk, things that aggravate offenses. So we made a very smart decision after Prohibition, after the disaster of Prohibition, to regroup and decide to tax and regulate alcohol. Why is it that we've decided to repeat the stupidity of history all over again, do Prohibition all over again, let it blow up in our face all over again, and now we sit in a situation where the drugs on the schedule of illegal drugs in this country, none of them are as destructive to public health or public safety as alcohol, and yet we treat them more severely? How can that possibly make any sense?
Marijuana, people argue about, but heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, are people talking about regulating all of those?
Well, they should. None of them have the track record of public health destruction or public safety destruction that alcohol has. Not one bit. And so there is no medical science that says they should be treated more severely than the most problematic addiction in the country, namely alcohol, and number two is tobacco. Like, those two are legal, but these other drugs that don't have that record of destruction are illegal. And I'm not a drug user. I just look at this as a human rights reality and a nonsensical aspect of public policy. So if the government were to do it correctly, they would say government has a reasonable, serious role in promoting public health, preserving public health and public safety. How do you do that with drugs? Well, you have a controlled substance regulatory position where you tax and regulate drugs, and you would have to institute in this country a serious drug treatment system and mental health system. And frankly, those would cost a fraction of what we spend on criminal justice. So if anyone thinks it would be expensive to have a mental health system that had drug addiction as a big part of it, it would be much cheaper than what we're doing, and it would hit two issues at the same time, because we also have, as we know, an epidemic of violence in this country where we have these school shootings and other kinds of acts of mental instability. And part of that is because we don't have a mental health system. Well, likewise, if we had a mental health system, it would also solve the drug issue at the same time. You'd have a safer country, a fairer country, because you wouldn't be locking up the nonviolent. And at the end of the day, you'd also be saving a tremendous amount of money compared to the waste we're involved in.
Eugene Jarecki is our guest. He is the director and writer of a film that won the Sundance Grand Jury Prize. It's called The House I Live In. It's going to appear Monday night, PBS at 10 p.m. Last question for you, Eugene. We had a politician here in studio, comes in quite often, and we were talking off the air about him being in favor of legalizing drugs. And he said to me, the minute 51% of my constituents are in favor of it, that's when I'll be in favor of it.
Yeah, that's an old adage in politics. The politician says, show me where my people are going so I may go there and lead them. We know that about politicians, and that's why it's so important that people see the movie, they get involved in the cause so that they begin to climb toward that 51%. We saw this in Colorado and Washington on Election Day. Those states successfully aired these issues to the point where the public said, my goodness, it doesn't make any sense to be keeping marijuana illegal. Broadly across the board, they have legalized marijuana in those two states. And you know what? Everything's just going fine. It didn't say, there goes the neighborhood. Well, that's very important. The country needs to start doing this more and more, like the state of California, which on Election Day voted for Prop 36. Overwhelming majority in California voted to reduce the severity of California's noted three strikes law. Prior to Election Day, if you got a third strike in California, it would send you to jail for the rest of your life, even if it was petty or nonviolent. California voters decided that's too severe and it's filling our jails with people who shouldn't be there for life, so let's change that law. So now they did. Now you have to have committed a serious or violent crime as your third strike to go to jail for the rest of your life, which makes sense. It's better justice. It's more fair. It's better for public safety. And lo and behold, it saves the state of California $100 million a year.
He is the director of a Sundance film that won Best Jury Prize Documentary 2012. The movie's called The House I Live In. Eugene Jarecki, Monday night, 10 p.m. PBS. We will definitely make sure we watch it. Eugene, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. Back in a moment. Big 550 KTRS.